Back with us on the SportsMax Zone. Good to have you on this Friday. Some leading figures in the world of sport have been taking strong action against Russia following the Eastern European country's invasion of neighbors Ukraine. There have been a number of developments in the last 24 hours, including UEFA's decision to strip St. Petersburg of hosting rights for the Champions League final set for May 28. That game will now be contested at the Stade de France in Paris. The following graphic shows several other decisions and requests made by various sporting bodies across Europe. So, confirming the Champions League final move from St. Petersburg to Paris, UEFA has ordered Russian and Ukrainian clubs to play at neutral venues. Manchester United have terminated a lucrative sponsorship deal with the Russian airline Aeroflot. Schalke say they'll remove the logo of main sponsor Gazprom from their shirt. The Ukrainian FA has asked UEFA to move the 2023 Super Cup final from Kazan in Russia, one of the far outposts. The Ukrainian FA has also asked FIFA to ban Russian teams from their competitions. Poland, Sweden and the Czech Republic have written to FIFA to say they will not travel to Russia to play World Cup qualifying games. The Ukrainian Premier League has been suspended. Formula One says it's impossible to hold the Russian GP in the current circumstances, and Formula One team Haas have removed their Russian-based sponsor. So the Man United decision with Aeroflot comes a day after the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson told the House of Commons in an emergency session that Aeroflot was banned from landing on British soil, British airspace, so they were banned from trips to the British Isles. Now they're having reactions from inside and outside Russia. Let's look at a few of them, specifically relating to the decision to move the Champions League final to France. Ralph Rangnick, the Manchester United manager, says it was inevitable and the right decision. The Chelsea boss, Thomas Tuchel, says, sadly, I think it's the worst reason to change location. This is not good news, but it had to happen. There are things more important than football. Alexander Dyukov, the Russian Football Union boss, says, we believe the decision was dictated by political reasons. The RFU has always adhered to the principle of sport is out of politics. Dmitry Peskov, Kremlin spokesman, says it's a shame such a decision has been made. St. Petersburg could have provided all favorable conditions to hold this festival of soccer. Reigning Formula One champion Max Verstappen and former champion Sebastian Vettel said it would have been wrong for the Russian GP, the Grand Prix, to go ahead. And yeah, the latest on Roman... Oh, so here's where we pause to discuss. So in the totality of what you have seen, lady and gentlemen, have the right decisions been made so far?
Well, I want to say that I felt as if they had no choice based on the extent and, you know, how serious this situation is. People are losing lives. I mean, that alone speaks for itself. The sporting bodies, they had to do what they felt as if was necessary. And of course, sometimes in this life, you're just left with your hands tied and they just... I think this was the decision that they had to make. They had a short time to make it, and it was the right one.
The fact is, you know, people say over and over that, you know, sports shouldn't be caught up in politics. And
it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, which is one of the comments we just heard in the narrative, in the graphics there. But that's not going to happen. The fact is, sports ministries in countries come under the auspices of the government. And sport is administered ultimately by, well, under the auspices of a governing hierarchy. So they have to respond to what political decisions are made from a governmental status. So there is not much sense in holding on to this thing that politics shouldn't be affecting sports. It will.
Yeah, it's a bit of a facetious argument because everything has nuances. And yes, there are ways where sport blatantly should not be interfered with by politicians, like when politicians decide to take over a football association or to take over a track and field body. But there are cases where sport has to take a step back because the matters concerning politics have primary interest, as in this case, and so the countries have to act. Simon Evans, our international football correspondent, is with us. Hardworking man, Simon Evans is, and you don't need me to tell you that. And he's been tracking all of these stories, plus some others, from his base in the UK. Simon, welcome again to the SportsMax Zone.
Good to be here, George.
Simon, let me start here. We had this conversation yesterday, and we were on the same page. And I want to bring it back again as a strand in this discussion. I'm saying to you, Simon, that as the hours go by, as we heard Boris Johnson in the Commons yesterday, as we heard from Joe Biden coming out of that meeting with G7 leaders in that telephone call, as we see the decisions that have been made earlier today right across Europe, I'm saying to you, Simon, the announcement yesterday by the FIFA president is more than curious, because there is no reason, Simon, for Gianni Infantino and FIFA to wait to determine whether or not they're going to play the World Cup qualifiers in Russia that are due in March, especially because 3 of the teams involved say they will not travel. I'm suggesting that it should have been enough for FIFA to say, well, look, in this act of war, when one sovereign nation sends its army into another sovereign nation to kill, with specific orders to slash, burn, and kill and cause mayhem, then that automatically should deny them the right of having things like football matches. Gianni Infantino yesterday, Simon, made it seem as if, well, if the fighting stops in a week from now, there will still be time for things to normalize and for the football to be played. And I'm saying no, because there must be punishment for the act of invading in the first place. And it doesn't matter how long the invasion lasted for, if it was for half an hour or if it stretches into a month. And I'm saying, Simon, FIFA got it wrong. What say you?
I think FIFA have found themselves in a very difficult position of their own making, really, because UEFA have acted very quickly. UEFA's final of the Champions League isn't until the end of May, but they've moved now to make that decision. FIFA have matches coming up in March, much more urgent for them to deal with it, and they're still sat here talking in this very unclear way about the matters. And you know, you look at it and you think, why are FIFA doing this? And FIFA do want to try and keep out of politics, as we say, but is this politics? I mean, this doesn't seem to me like an issue of left wing or right wing or this government or that government. This is a situation. The only thing that's been similar to it in football in the last 30 years would have been the Yugoslav situation, when Yugoslavia in Euro 1992 was actually kicked out of the tournament. It wasn't a question of would they play home games or not. They were kicked out of the Euros. That's how Denmark got in and ended up winning the thing. So the discussion, I think, that some countries want to have at FIFA is not about where these games are going to be played, but whether Russia should even be playing and competing in the World Cup at all.
And that's the other place I was going to go, Simon, because I was reading an article last week, and it was making reference to how Russia would be competing in Qatar as ROC, given that the World Cup would count as one of those big tournaments that, according to the punishment leveled on Russia for its state-sponsored doping program, the big events would not have the Russian flag, would not have a team called Russia, but ROC would be present in Qatar. And I'm wondering if the ramifications for them even participating, if those ramifications, the fallout, the consequences of ROC participating aren't even worse than they were a week ago. And if this dilly-dallying, this delay, this pussyfooting by FIFA isn't making even that decision worse, a decision that seemed straightforward not so many days ago.
And what's even more remarkable about it, George, is that the IOC, who, as we were saying last night, have made every effort to keep Russia involved in sport through all the doping crisis. The IOC have now turned around and told all the international sports federations not to hold their events in Russia. So when Thomas Bach is being more radical in dealing with the Russians than you, then I think FIFA do have something to consider.
And the last thing before I pass this on to my colleague Simon, just for the record, there's more Russian money in UEFA football than there is Russian money in FIFA football. Isn't that true?
That is true, yeah. And one of the big deals that the Russian money in UEFA is the Gazprom, the sponsor, the energy company, who haven't been sanctioned yet because they supply a lot of gas and oil to European countries, particularly Germany. But there's reports tonight that UEFA's lawyers are working on how to get out of that sponsorship deal. I think it's worth about 80 million, that deal. It's a lot of money. And UEFA's looking into that. So really, FIFA do seem to have been either very slow, if we're being generous, or very confused about this issue.
Yeah, and Simon, speaking about sponsorship, how crucial and how important was it that Manchester United, separate themselves from Russia in the terms of, ending that contract they had with the national airline Aeroflot?
Yeah, I don't think they had much choice either, really, after Aeroflot were basically banned from Britain. to have the biggest club in Britain having a sponsorship deal with a company that's been banned because of this war was a situation that was untenable for Manchester United. So another of those decisions which really you could call a no-brainer.
Yeah, I asked you yesterday, Simon, about the Gazprom sponsorship that UEFA is locked into with that giant energy company from Russia. I anticipated that today's meeting would probably have addressed that in some way, shape or form, and they still haven't. Your thoughts on that?
Well, they haven't announced anything. I think they did talk about it. My understanding is that they are looking into it, but because it is a legally binding contract, it's not as simple as simply walking away from it. They've entered into a multi-year contract with a private company. So my understanding is that UEFA's lawyers are looking at what they can do about that. I don't know if a political decision has been taken by UEFA that they definitely want to cancel it or not, but the lawyers are looking into what the options would be.
Yeah, the IOC, apart from their overall disappointment in what has happened, pointed in the past 48 hours to the fact that Russia has broken this Olympic truce that was signed in December of last year, where there is an agreement signed by 193 countries, including Russia, to promote peace and cease any kind of hostility in the Olympic period, which stretches, I think, to the 20th of March, 7 days after the Paralympics, Winter Paralympics end. How much do you think that has bothered the IOC?
I think it has bothered them because I think some people in the IOC have almost stuck their necks out for Russia over the last few months. They didn't kick them out of the figure skating competition when that doping case emerged. And beyond that, they allowed them to compete as the ROC when many, many countries were calling for them to be kicked out of the Olympic movement altogether. And then to start a war just hours after, just hours after the Beijing Winter Olympics have finished, before the Paralympics have started, really, I think, has pushed any sort of tolerance of Russia's behaviour to the limit within the IOC.
Simon, back to the FIFA issue again, because I've spent overnight trying to figure out what it is that Gianni Infantino was told at that call with member associations, which prompted him to give that vague, at best, at kindest, perhaps confusing a response to the Russian situation. And what is true, Simon? What is true? I'm wondering what the member associations would have said to him on the issue. Because, of course, I know leaders lead, and the dog is always to wag the tail. But sometimes the tail wags the dog. And I'm wondering if the members weren't strident enough in saying, Mr. President, we expect you to do this on our behalf, to represent us in this way, to make this statement to the world's media about our stance on the issue where Russia is concerned. So given that Gianni Infantino said what he did, I'm gambling, Simon, that his member associations gave him no charge, and so what he represented to us was effectively what happened in the meeting, which is the members took no position and gave him no mandate to represent no position, hence what he said to us on Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference between FIFA and UEFA, obviously, is that UEFA is just European member associations. And within Europe, the view about what Russia have done is very, very clear. A number of those FAs who sit on the highest bodies in UEFA are from, countries like Hungary, which border Ukraine and so on, who are very, very nervous about what Russia's doing. Whereas FIFA has the whole world. African countries, Middle Eastern countries, Asian countries, all over the world. So in that world, there are countries that are involved in military conflicts, have been and will be. And so there will be some FAs who don't want to set a precedent of kicking out countries or punishing countries because of military conflicts they've got involved in. It's a different situation. It's more akin to the United Nations than the European Union, if you like. So very different situation, and Infantino is very conscious of the fact that he does represent the whole world, and most of his votes come from outside of Europe. So he's going to be very careful on that. But having said all that, it is still surprising that on a matter that has drawn condemnation from around the world, not just Europe, that Infantino has been so careful as he has been.
Yeah, the Labour MP, Simon, Chris Brandt, named Roman Abramovich in the Commons during a debate, talking about him being on a list of persons with very close ties to the Russian leader, and effectively calling for that man to not have any assets. The Chelsea Football Club should be divested from Roman Abramovich's empire of holdings in the UK. Are we likely to see any movement on that? Are we likely to see a new sanctions list announced by Boris Johnson or the Foreign Secretary having punitive measures taken against Roman Abramovich on that? And could this be the start of a divorce between the Russian oligarch Abramovich and the Chelsea Football Club, you think?
There have been reports of people who are interested in buying Chelsea sort of hovering around the club now, thinking that Abramovich might sell, might cut his losses and get out before something like that you describe happens. There haven't been any suggestions that sanctions against Abramovich, against Chelsea specifically, his involvement with Chelsea specifically, are about to happen. But, you know, this conflict goes on and there's pressure and pressure every day because Ukraine are constantly asking for more to be done, help us more. And the situation is, you know, looking at the images and the horror stories that we're reading about today, it gets worse every day. And it's probably going to get worse for quite a few more days. So there will be that pressure all the time for more and more sanctions. And I've no information about whether the British government is likely to take a stance on that Chelsea factor or not. But it is a very easy target for them. It's one that would grab headlines. It's one that would be seen as taking a strong stance and the kind of thing you could see happening. But I have no information about whether they're considering doing that or not.
Yes, thank you very much for your information today, my friend. Always a pleasure talking to you. We'll talk again.
All the best.
Good. Simon Evans there. And just a note for the viewers, Roman Abramovich, no longer welcome in Britain effectively. The last time he was there a couple of years ago, he flew in on an Israeli passport, but that was a visitor's passport for a few days, left thereafter. And the word out of the UK is that he'll not get a visa to visit Britain anytime now, not for the foreseeable future. So that is where that is concerned. Meanwhile, as we break, the Ukrainian Premier League has unsurprisingly been cancelled. There are no such issues, though, across the rest of Europe, including the English Premier League. Round 27 began earlier today with Southampton beating Norwich. We go to break with the remaining fixtures for the weekend. So Leeds play Tottenham, Brentford host Newcastle, Burnley go to Crystal Palace, Villa are on the seaside, they play Brighton, Manchester United entertain Watford, City make the trip to Merseyside to play Everton, and Wolves get a day out in London as they play West Ham.